I've been working with this idea of emptiness as part of my Buddhist practice, my mindfulness practice, and it's been so great. You can also use levity, so like laughter, laughing. And it's not to spiritually bypass or, force some sort of positive story. It's really to free yourself into seeing just how void everything is until we bring our own meaning to it. So, what kind of story do you want to write? What do you want your response to be? Rather than some sort of automatic reaction that is unintentional and unthoughtful. Beautiful. I am on day 19 of my cycle. Wow. Just connecting into that number 19. I do feel like I'm crossing the threshold into my inner autumn, probably in the next day or two. Where are you? How are you feeling? What season's resonating with you today? We are going to be learning and chatting about the inner autumn season. And it's so fitting because I've been really tapping into that kind of energy and vibe all morning. I've been singing and chanting, and we're going to talk about that, why it is connected to the wild woman, to the throat chakra, to express ourselves and to let that divine feminine muse of creativity flow through us. Again, we have to be empty to let her come through us, to let her create whatever she wants to create through our body and our life and our story. Feels so good. Feels so purposeful. So let's get into it. Pulling up my notes here. All right. So this season gets such a bad rap, and I almost forget because I've been doing this work for so long, and I really have grown into a deep appreciation and even love of my inner autumn, that I forget that it's the hardest season for so many. And it can be difficult for me as well. It's very dynamic, right? So maybe you just think of it as PMS because it's that premenstrual time. Like, oh, she's got PMS, or do you need to start your period? Are you about to start your period? Are you on your period? These questions that we get thrown at us as women anytime we have, some sacred rage flow through our system, or, a bit of a powerful vocal tone coming through in conversations, or when we get really passionate and fired up, sometimes maybe the men in our lives or just the disembodied unconscious in our lives might say to us like, oh, are you going to start your period? And it's in a judgmental tone. You can hear it, is that ever helpful? I've spoken about how we can develop cycle awareness in our relationships and empower our partners to ask us if we're going to start our period, but the tone is so important and their intention behind it is so everything. And trust me, when you're in your inner autumn, you're gonna hear that tone. You're gonna be a little sensitive tone detector. So giving the grace and the space for yourself to develop this sensitive awareness, and for those in your life, particularly those who don't have a cycle, to also develop this awareness and this compassion. But what I have found with the inner autumn is that this is the most potent work of all of menstrual cycle awareness, is in the inner autumn, because it's the natural home of the inner critic, which means all throughout the cycle, We're going to start to feel judgmental of ourselves. We're going to have these inner critic thoughts and feelings. We're going to experience imposter syndrome, right? All these things. And what I recommend is that we make a list or we put them in a box and we don't really work with them too much. We try to just kind of get them on the page. And in our inner autumn, we open that box up, we take that list out, and we begin to work with those self judgments and those self criticisms, because you're going to feel the most feisty, the most defensive, but I mean it in a positive way. You're going to feel the most empowered to defend yourself during your inner autumn. And so bringing that energy to the inner critic is so beautiful. And this is not my concept. This comes from Alexandra Pope and Siani Hugo Willitzer in their book Wild Power, which I am so obsessed with, and we will read in my Ebb and Flow program if you join us. It will be our first book club book. I'm so excited. You can find out more about Ebb and Flow at ellengilbert.com. But in their book Wild Power, they really gave me this concept of the inner autumn being the natural home of the inner critic. And so it has really helped me. It has really helped me to remember when I'm in my inner spring, when I'm in my inner summer, even when I'm in my inner winter, that time will come for me to work through some of this self-doubt and self-criticism, but that time has not arrived yet. And it frees me up during those other phases to just keep my focus on what I'm doing, on the work that wants to be done through me. And then in my inner autumn, it's like, oh yeah, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling a little bit rageful, but I call it sacred rage. It's that wild woman archetype. She has the power to transform the world. She has the power to flip this patriarchal paradigm on its head. Like, she is here to fuck shit up, and it's beautiful. So bringing that to our inner critic, we can see that the inner critic all along was trying to help us and protect us. But sometimes it needs a little feist, a little fire to see that we are not to be fucked with, that we can defend ourselves. So I'll give you an example of this in case you're like, what is she talking about? So maybe let's say throughout your cycle, throughout the inner spring and inner summer, you were beginning to feel some self-criticism creep in around your work. And maybe it's the voice of your boss that's in your head saying, really, you could have done better. You couldn't have done any better on this project. You really couldn't have applied yourself or worked a few extra hours to, do as well as your colleagues, or, really prove yourself to the company or increase the bottom line or whatever it is, right? You start to hear that voice in your head, and it's really wearing on you, and it might be stealing some of your potent life force in those other seasons, particularly the inner spring, which is such a tender season already. It could stop you in your tracks from creating what needs to be created that cycle up to that inner summer, which is the peak creation moment, ovulation, right? So what if instead you wrote it on a list, you wrote a letter, or you made a list of those thoughts and you've tucked it away in your desk? And then inner autumn rolls around and you take it out and you say, okay, inner critic, do your worst, is really what we're saying. And you hear those words again. And there's almost this, for me, it's just so silly in my inner autumn. Things that I might have taken really seriously in the other seasons, I can laugh off more easily because I have 0 fucks left to give. And I'm able to spar a little bit and throw down that gauntlet and say, you know what? I tried my hardest, and my company does not own my soul, and I am unwilling to devote more than 40 hours of my life each week to someone else's vision. You know, you can create these truly powerful, rooted mantras to say back to the inner critic when you are in your inner autumn. So I invite you to play with that. Excuse me. Yeah, really play with that in the cycles to come and see what happens. I think I might do a whole retreat around the inner critic because she has a lot of potent, sacred lessons for us and lots of shadows. And it's just, there's so much depth and richness there. But okay, I digress. So that's one beautiful part of the shadow work of our inner autumn is this inner critic work. The other shadow that gives me such gratitude about this season is this ability to cultivate self-compassion. Because maybe your whole life you've hated the premenstrual phase, your whole bleeding life, I should say. You've always thought of it negatively. But once you begin to cultivate menstrual cycle awareness, MCA, you can really tap in and notice, oh, wait, I'm on day 24, I'm on day 26. No wonder my nervous system feels shot. You know, no wonder my tone of voice wasn't the most loving and compassionate. No wonder I snapped and had a short fuse today with my kids, you know? And it's not to justify and say, like, it's all good, I don't need to make reparations or try to live in integrity and love during these days, but it's just to say, wow, you know, my hormones have taken a nosedive. And all that feel good oxytocin and estrogen from last week has really flatlined. And particularly the second half of that inner autumn. And how can I be a little bit more gentle with myself? How can I be a little more understanding and sweet and gentle? Like, what do I really need? And that's self-attunement, right? We can bring a hand to the heart. Or a hand to the womb, or one of each. What do I really need? And how can I meet this need? And soon we begin to see that everyone who reacts out of hate, out of fear, there's so much hurt inside. There is such a lack of awareness. How does that awaken compassion within us to realize they're just hurting? How does that shift your mindset? It starts with us, dear ones, beautiful ones. It starts with us. Can we bring this awareness to our own felt experience? Can we connect the dots on our behavior and our inner life? Can we have compassion for our suffering? The inner autumn, the premenstrual phase, is such a potent season for cultivating this. It's so beautiful and so sweet. So let's get into it. Yes, so the very first thing that happens hormonally with this inner autumn is progesterone gets released. So as soon as we ovulate, progesterone is released to nourish a potential pregnancy. So Biologically, your womb is hoping to create this new life. Yeah, we talked about that yesterday. And progesterone is this hormone that helps to nourish that new life. So before the body realizes it's not pregnant, we're getting these amazing benefits of progesterone. And that first part of the inner autumn is really all about adulting and taking care of ourselves and being cozy. That's what progesterone gives us. You can think of it as the nesting hormone, you know. And maybe you feel drawn to cultivate your beautiful nest, tend your temple, and get all those last minute projects done that need doing. It's a great time to cross off those unfinished to-dos on your list. As I said, I'm waiting for my next inner autumn to do my taxes because it's more natural. I don't have to force these things. I don't have to force tying up loose ends in my inner autumn. It just happens. It's what I want to do. It's what I'm driven to do. And then what happens? So after the body realizes it's not pregnant, that progesterone drops off. Yeah, and everything really flatlines, and we can experience, of course, some discomfort. There can be almost a sense of the veils are thin. So, if you think of that rising energy during our inner spring and our summer, those veils of the womb are thickening, thickening, thickening for a hopeful implantation of this life, yeah? Or this creation, we can say. And then once the body realizes that there is no life there, at least in a literal sense, it does thin and start to give way again. And then we shed it in our inner winter. So I like to think of it as the veils are thinning in this inner autumn. And that might feel like the veil of your skin. Maybe your skin gets thinner. Yeah. And you notice that you're more sensitive. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. What makes being sensitive a negative thing? Maybe you've been told your whole life you're too sensitive. I definitely got that message growing up and felt like it was such a negative thing. So I had to armor myself all the time and really make sure I give off an image and a projection of not caring. But the older I get, the more I realize what a gift it is to be sensitive, to be empathic, But what is needed to make that a beautiful gift? Lots of boundaries, lots of creative outlets, and of course, the right kinds of people, the right kinds of environments, that appreciate that sensitivity, where you feel nourished, reciprocated, supported, safe. You feel you are with those who get you. And we need this in our inner autumn most of all. So we're not quite in that period cave yet of the inner winter, right? But we're not in that peak social vibrancy of our ovulation either. We're somewhere in the middle. So starting to trail off a bit on your social calendar and connecting again one-on-one with beloved dear ones, maybe for some tea. Maybe you're not hitting the clubs in your premenstrual phase. Maybe it's something really nourishing and cozy with a trusted loved one. Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Any questions? Please drop them in the comments. So it's around days 20 to day 26. And something I want to mention is, and this is from Lucy Peach or Peaches, I don't remember, from that Period Queen podcast. She really taught me that we're going to get all kinds of triggers in our inner autumn. So we're going to want to act on them. We're going to want to like cut people out of our lives, burn lots of bridges. You know, there could be some sacred rage awakening. But instead of taking action right away, she cautions us to bleed on it and see if those first few days of the cycle, if we're still focused on whatever it was that was triggering us in our inner autumn, that maybe action really is needed here. And it, you know, hopefully we can be skillful and compassionate always in our communication, and that will be more accessible to us in our inner winter and inner spring as well. But just to bleed on it, like sleep on it, bleed on it. And this concept has really helped me. As an Aries, I am quite impulsive and I like to take action. So this whole MCA journey has helped me slow down and be patient and to trust the cycle and trust that everything has a place and a time. Yeah. Okay, just wanted to share that. So as I said, plan for adulting in your inner autumn, setting lots of boundaries, and plan to close your cycle. So reflecting on the cycle that just passed, reflecting on that creative project maybe that you completed, reflecting on, you know, other ways you want to guide your life gently, steer it into greater alignment. This is called align. Hello. And inner autumn is really the ship captain's wheel of steering that ship, steering our life into universal flow and purpose and intention. An inner critic has a big role to play in that, which I love talking about. So sign up for your free cycle coaching session with me tomorrow, and we can get into your purpose, your alignment, what that looks like on a soul, this life level. All right. So, what you're gonna want to avoid in this season, saying yes when you really mean no. Because guess what? No is a complete sentence. Don't have to justify or explain. We can be compassionate and say no. No, thank you. Do not try to maintain your summer pace, right? Don't get identified with that summer from the week before. Like, oh, I can still do it all. I can still be superwoman. If I'm not, I won't have any value or worth. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Lean into that self-defensive, in a positive way, self-protective wild woman energy. And please avoid disregarding your experience as just premenstrual. I hear this a lot, like, oh, right, I was just premenstrual. Like, we can have compassion when we overreact or when we have a harsh tone with our loved ones or whatever it is. That's what it usually is for me. We can have compassion for that without saying there was no reason behind it or the reason was just the hormones. Does that make sense? Because if you look deeper, if you look under the surface, that experience could be trying to tell you something, trying to teach you something about that relationship, about your own need in that moment. What's the deeper meaning? Inner autumn is a great time to peel back these layers and stay really curious and non-judgmental. You know, curious, friendly curiosity. Wow, isn't that interesting? This is a phrase I'll say often to help me have some non-attachment. Beautiful. Learn your autumn crossover days. Learn what day it tends to be. Again, your journal's your best friend. Don't judge it. Lots of boundaries. Lots of boundaries. So maybe you're like me and you made way too many plans last week in your inner summer. And your inner autumn's here and you're like, oh shit. I have packed every week full, every day full this week. It's okay to flake out sometimes. And the more we create these communities of menstrual cycle awareness and support, the more we will be able to say, hey, I totally don't know what I was thinking. I am premenstrual, man. I cannot hang. I cannot go dancing, you know? And then it's like, oh, there's just understanding. Oh, yeah, totally. No, that makes total sense. Like, let's shift. Do we want to do something else or do we want to take a rain check? No judgment. And we can, of course, relate this to the earth season of autumn, cozy sweater weather vibes. How can we bring that coziness, that warmth, that nourishing flannel cider vibe to our self care during our inner autumn? So, my journaling practice, my morning pages practice, will look like a lot of reflection. Like I said, reflecting on the past cycle, but also just reflecting on my life. Where do I need to steer into greater alignment? Reflection, the final push to maybe make that list of like, this is what needs to get done, because I've got a lot of progesterone, a lot of nesting, adulting energy, and I want to cross off my to-dos before the bleed arrives. That's a beautiful gift we can give ourselves. So I might use my journal for that, and then lots of healing, you know, writing about what I learned from the inner critic this cycle, or actually journaling the conversation between myself and my inner critic. Using different colored pens for that can be really powerful. Yeah, writing your manifesto, like how you're going to change the world when you get really fired up with that sacred rage. But don't get too attached to it, you know. It's just a season. Again, everything has a time and a place. It's also associated with the third quarter moon. So our third quarter moon, when the other half of the moon is alit, will be around February 23rd. So next time you look up and see that perfect quarter moon, which we just had 2 days ago, the first quarter moon, remember? But we're talking now about that third quarter moon, that last quarter of the moon cycle. That's really this autumn energy of checking back in. How are my cycle intentions coming along, you know? Or just remembering that intention of release. Release. Everything's empty, not attachment. Levity, right? Yeah, that's what I think of with third quarter moon. And then I get really creative in my inner autumn. And part of that is because wild woman energy is about self-expression. She wants to be expressed. You can think of her like Kundalini, divine feminine energy that coils at the base of your spine and arises like a serpent. It wants to be expressed through you. It's beautiful. So let that creativity flow. This is a great season for it. Okay, nutritionally. Oh, well, let's keep talking about self-care. There's one other point I wanted to touch on. So some words we can think of for this season are slow, soothe, rest, receive, take. So summer was very give, open-handed. The very next week, we're going down into take, the opposition. This doesn't always, for me, I'd be so curious to hear how you experience this. I'm going to try my best to put this into words that make sense. For me, the give of my inner summer, it naturally happens. I'm just naturally open. It's not a directive so much as it is a description of how I naturally feel. For the inner autumn, however, it is so difficult for me to receive and to slow and to rest. And this word, or these words, these guiding words, feel more of like a directive. And there's a different energy to it. It's a reminder. Oh, yeah. Slow, soothe, receive, rest. And I think that's why I talk about the first half versus the second half of this season of inner autumn, because those hormones are really doing funky, different dynamic dances. It's almost like two seasons in one. Like the beginning of autumn for me is like push to finish, close, wrap up, get it all done, nest. That feels natural. But it also facilitates and makes way for the second part of autumn, the end of autumn, so that we can slow, so that we can receive, so that we can soothe ourselves, because we've already gotten it done. You can find yourself pushing so much in the inner autumn and saving so much work for the inner autumn throughout the cycle that when you get there, you really are overloaded. And it's like, I have found myself having delayed bleeds, much worse period pain, a lot of stress, a lot more irritability, because I overpacked my inner autumn thinking, well, everything adulting just needs to fit into that week. But that's not really compassionate either, right? So we got to balance this and find what works for us. Because how can we be at once crossing everything off our to-do list in order to bleed and slowing and soothing and resting and having all this self-compassion and self-care? You know, I'd love to hear thoughts from you, like particularly as you deepen into your own awareness journey with your cycle. How does this show up for you? I don't want to give too much of my own experience because yours might be different. That's how it shows up for me, though. So, really focusing on, there's like a moment when I just know in my inner autumn, I have done enough this cycle. And if I don't slow and soothe now, I'm going to have a really difficult bleed. You know, it's like, it's so interesting. And just talking about it is helping me clarify that. So thank you for listening. But I absolutely love lots of hot baths, you know, lots of tea, just really beginning to slow that wheel so that when we come to full stillness in the inner winter, it's not so jarring. So my nutrition for the inner autumn, your nutrition can look like eating foods with high serotonin, which I didn't even know that foods had serotonin. So I'm learning a lot. But in your inner autumn, your estrogen and progesterone are waning. Like I said, it's just all coming to a halt. And if you eat these high serotonin foods, you're kind of helping balance your well-being and your mood. So leafy greens, quinoa, and buckwheat. Who knew? Eat up in your inner autumn. Magnesium is super important as well. And you've probably heard like what a magic elixir magnesium is for the cycle, but it's particularly good during your inner autumn. So dark chocolate, yay, high in magnesium. Spinach, high in magnesium. Pumpkin seeds, This is all going to help keep your energy up, your brightness, and your vitality, not for anyone else, but for you. You are worthy. You're worthy of being balanced and feeling good. So let's talk about movement. Jamie Botian, our dear yoga muse, says that in yoga for the inner autumn phase, we can focus on low crescent lunge, supported bridge pose. So that I use a block kind of under my upper back, between my shoulder blades or around my bra strap area, on its lowest setting to really release into that supported bridge. So sweet. Half pigeon and head to knee forward bend. So all of these poses are really good at grounding us. So we can ride these waves of our dynamic inner autumn and feel that soothing, nourishing Mama Earth energy, which we need so much at this time. And she says that we also want to slow down our movements. So we're not totally still yet. We're not at that yin yoga, resting poses, but we are slowing things down, slowing the transitions between poses. So that's for yoga. Other movement I love to do this season includes slow, intuitive movement. So almost like Tai Chi or just letting your intuition guide you. Really, I'll put on like a really sweet, slow song. And I have all these playlists on my public Spotify account. So I have an Inner Autumn playlist that's really good. It might be my favorite. And you can just move to the music. And I find myself just wanting to move to music more naturally during my inner autumn. It's that expression of wild woman. So just anything that's super gentle, and walks in nature and just sitting in nature, meditating in nature, sitting on a tree trunk, grounding into the earth with your bare feet, or lying completely in Shavasana on the ground outside this season is so sweet. I think because come inner winter, I don't really want to be going outside even. I can find it hard to leave home. So getting that in inner autumn is really nice. Hope that's helpful. And then we're going to talk about a couple more things. We're going to do our embodiment practice, I promise. Relationships and adventure during your inner autumn. So we did talk about, sitting with a glass of red wine with a friend, or a mug of tea, very chill one-on-one, sweatpants allowed kind of friends and vibes. Because you want to be mindful. If people are really triggering you, do you want to say something you'll regret in your inner autumn? So having those conversations. I'm in my inner autumn. I'm premenstrual, heads up, low energy, but also a potential for some outbursts, or, this is what's coming up for me right now. What if we could communicate like that freely? What a different world, right? We can build it. We can. So, and then of course, our romantic relationships. So lots of cuddling, lots of sweet, cozy on the couch, kind of at home dates. There's a moment that they talk about in Wild Power called the separation. And this moment happens just before the blood arrives. So I'm going to talk about it now because I like to be mindful of it in my inner autumn. So if you're listening to this replay or watching this replay in your inner autumn, and I hope you return to these in each relevant season to feel supported. Um, when you're in your inner autumn, towards the end, you can really start to notice this sensation of wanting to be alone and wanting to be with people happening simultaneously. And it can be painful and confusing because you don't really know what you want or what you need. And this is happening just before separation. So separation is has the potential to be like divine union experience, like really I don't know if this makes sense to you, but the veils are so thin that they completely disappear. And there's no separation between you and goddess or source or whatever, universe, love, um, your true nature. It's like an ego death. So if you've ever experienced psychedelics or a really beautiful meditation, maybe you've experienced ego death a bit. It can be like that every cycle. You can have this moment of ecstatic bliss. Um, yeah, the key is not to cling to it, but it arrives just before the blood. And I often want to go away, like go into nature. Or like, I remember one time it happened right at sunset, and I was picking up my groceries in Albuquerque, and I just like was at a red light. And the sunset was so beautiful. I mean, it felt like I was on drugs. And I was like, this is the separation. I'm about to start my period. And sure enough, I did that night. Um, but I let myself spend the rest of that evening just in my sanctuary, my office space, away from my husband, just meditating and soaking in this amazing love and creative energy. So, however you experience the divine, or whatever you call it, just allowing yourself to be in it during this time. But just before that ecstatic bliss moment, we can experience like a resistance to letting go. And I'm getting into like really spiritual, like cycle concepts here. This has been my experience, and this is why I'm most interested um, in the menstrual cycle, is using it as like a metaphor for our spiritual journey. And it's really not even a metaphor because it's as real as you are real. It's that close. It's your biology. It's right here. But just before that separation, I'll feel really irritable and lonely and a lot of grief, a lot of desire to be with my husband and to have that intense connection of intimacy, but also like a repulsion to anyone and just wanting to be alone. And then there's loneliness and there's this oscillation. But when we're aware of it, right, when we bring our awareness to this discomfort, it can be like, oh, right, I'm about to have separation, and it just shifts everything. So I really want to hear what your experience is with this, if you start to attune and notice it. Okay, beautiful. So your life's work and your inner autumn. I mean, I think we've covered it. It's a creative time. It's a time for getting shit done, crossing off those big to-dos. For me, it's a good time to edit what I've written, but it's also a great time to write. You can do pretty much any work in this time, but I don't really feel so playful in my inner autumn as far as work is concerned, my creative work. I feel like it's time to get down to business and be an adult after the more playful seasons of my spring and summer. And if you let the maiden out to play in her inner spring, you you're gonna have content to then go back and edit and work with in your inner autumn. So just feel into that for yourself. Um, yeah. Okay, let's do some embodiment, and then we're gonna talk about wild woman and our ritual for this season. So the throat chakra, right? That is one, two, three, four, five. Number five. And it's the throat, the neck, the back of the neck, that spinal cord connection, um, connecting brain and body. It's, it's connected to the womb as well. If you ever Google a picture of vocal cords, um, it looks like a pussy. Okay, so there's like there's a really interesting connection between our vocal cords and our womb space. And you can read about it with Chinese medicine, or you can just feel into it and experience it for yourself. My throat chakra is extremely open today. And what that feels like for me is it's easy to teach, it's easy to speak with you, it's easy to go live and talk about pussy and womb and all these things, blood, and you know, these concepts that might seem really triggering to a lot of people. My throat chakra is open, it's expressive. There are times where it is extremely shut down and closed off, and I'll get very weird sensations. I'll like want to cough a lot, or I'll just feel like a blockage, and I'll notice like I need to feel into my throat chakra. It's also connected to listening. So it's listening and it's expressing. They're equally important. And I want you to bring a hand to your throat and just say something. Maybe say, I am here. I am here. Feel the vibrations, la 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 la, as you speak. La la la, I am here. You can chant Om, very familiar mantra. Om. The connected vibrations of the universe. You can chant Ma. I've been working with this mantra just today as part of my Kundalini practice. Ma, the great mother, goddess, lover of all. Ma. Not trying to control it. Free it. Free the vibrations. Free your self-expression. And you can sing, listen, listen. Feel those vibrations. Do not judge your singing ability. We all can sing. And it is so beautiful to connect us to our true selves, to that sweet, sweet spirit that we all possess as humans. Listen. Yeah, she's here. The muse, the one who creates through us. This is an embodiment practice, right? Feeling the vibrations of our words, of our song, in our throat chakra, in our ears, resonating in our heads, in our entire body. Your entire body is an instrument. Your posture, your breath, the position of your rib cage, the open or closed nature of your throat chakra, all of these factors change the resonance of your sound and therefore the resonance of what others hear. We are such powerful beings. Let's be aware of that power and channel it with love. And that's all the embodiment we're going to do today. But I really encourage you, and the ritual I was going to share, I'll go ahead and share it, is to express yourself. So we're working with the element of wind. I like to think of wild woman as this crazy windstorm just blowing through a forest and all the leaves on the trees shaking and falling, and just the power of that image is wild woman to me. She is the winds of change. So wind, that is what we're expressing when we sing, when we speak, when we chant. So your ritual for your inner autumn is to write a song, a spell, or a chant. You know, what we say, we create. You know, we are all witches. We are all capable of this magic. That's what intention is. That's what manifestation is. That's what energy is. So write a song, a spell, or a chant. And I want you to just repeat it over and over and over, like at least 13 times. And notice how you feel. Maybe journal after, maybe record it as a voice memo on your phone. I wrote one today that was so beautiful. It brought me to tears. I say I wrote it, I co-created it, or I let it come through me. And notice what you really have to let go of to allow this muse energy to flow through. It's not so much anything we're constructing, it's more of what we're deconstructing. The inner critic, for example. So what I wrote today, the words, what I co-created today, the words that kept coming through me were all is well, I am free, I am love, all is well, all is free, all is love, I am all. And there was music that just came with it, and maybe I'll share it someday. It was really special and sweet, a sweet moment with the goddess. And that's your ritual for this season. So see what wants to come out. Maybe it's just one little mantra. Maybe it's one little phrase, I am free. Just say it over and over and over and over, even if you don't believe it at first, and notice what shifts. Everything's empty. Don't take yourself or this too seriously, ever. Touch briefly on Wild Woman before we close here. So her medicine is witnessing, expressing, and freedom. That's her medicine. She wants you to be free. She wants to be free. She wants to free this world. Like I said, she's going to turn this old paradigm on its head. So many of us are awakening to this truth. I see it every day. And she needs witnessing. She needs you to witness her power in you, and to be expressed. Her shadows include that inner critic. Yeah. That rage, which can be sacred if it's skillful, if we use it with care. And then I would say her nervous system response that is dysregulated is that fight response, you know, that aggression, tensioning in the body. You can explore that by making fists when you want to fight. And just start to notice what happens if you release release that fist that energy can expel and dispel. And then the last thing I want to say is on the wheel of the year, this is associated with the autumn equinox, or Mabon, as the pagans call it, as we pagans call it. Um, and the themes are really the harvest, abundance. The Mabon queen is the queen of the harvest. And I like to think of the wild woman as queen, or giving way to queen when we finally allow ourselves to rest. It's like, I am sovereign and I choose to slow down. There's also a theme this time of year of balance, because the light and the dark have balanced completely. There's a theme of gratitude, of course, Thanksgiving, that type of energy, and hearth and home, those cozy, nurturing, nesting vibes. So it's all connected. I hope you're starting to see that and feel that in your own experience. And the wind element, the tarot suit is the suit of the sword. So the Queen of Swords you might work with this week, which is associated, swords are associated with action, power, change, and ambition. So if that resonates for your practice, so many layers, so many avenues we can go into. It's all empty. Don't get rigid. Enjoy your practice. Reach out with any questions. Book your free coaching session with me, and we'll get into it. And of course, sign up for Ebb and Flow. Get on that wait list, and you get $800 off the founding members price this week. If you want to chat with me, the way to do that is to book your free coaching session. All right, beloved, so much love. Thanks for joining. Bye.